Let's make sense of this.
Let's make sense.
Sense makers.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Keith.
Hey, so Sunday afternoon, we're just back from Tableau conference. We talked to Robert on Friday after getting off the plane about the conference experience. In this conversation, I thought it might just be you and I, like we always do after the conference, trying to make sense of things. Like saying, okay, we got the inputs from the keynotes, we got the inputs from the product release, we got the inputs from their direction. How do we see all of these things fitting together?
Yep. Yeah, and we've watched some sessions and had a dinner or two and talked about things and what kind of sense can we make of where Tableau's at. So between us, we've been to over 20 Tableau conferences, I think, at this point.
Yeah, you must have almost 15 in you, and I've got at least 10. So 25 combined years of Tableau conference experience. To me, one of the best ways that we could sort of frame this conversation of making sense of Tableau's direction is really in Southard's keynote, right? Like he described this fourth wave, and he said there's really four main problem statements that they're trying to solve. They've got this, all of us have this problem that the data is fragmented, right? Users don't trust the data, they don't trust the insights. Even when you do provide data-driven insights, those insights can be overlooked because of lack of effective communication or not putting them in the right place, meeting the users in their workflow, or lack of story and narrative, whatever the case may be. And then, Tableau has been consistently, you described to Robert and I, a dead-end tool, something of a place where it doesn't feed its way back into the workflow. And so there's this real need Southern described for reusable assets and reusable analytics components.
Yep. Yeah, and the Tableau presented with that a vision, and so it was Southern and Padmasree and some other folks on kind of how Tableau is going to address that in the market. So how do we want to jump in?
Well, I've got these four big words that we got out of yesterday's conversation with Robert. Like my big takeaways were composable and API, and yours were ecosystem, like speaking to where Tableau fits in the overall data ecosystem within an organization, and then integration or extensibility of the thing.
Yeah. So with that, why don't I talk about what I mean? Because it also highlights that how I think of Tableau historically as kind of a dead end sort of visualization piece. Very often we see some sort of slide like this in our with our data when we start looking at our data pipelines and the people using our visualizations way out here on the right. And so there's this kind of left to right sequential sort of notion of it. And historically, that's what Tableau provided. We could log in via web browser. We could log in via a Tableau mobile app, get a subscription and so on, and see a visualization. And then there might be some sort of business process where that got presented or handed off to somebody else. And the piece of this that I was hearing, or a piece of frustration along the ways, has been, okay, Tableau, what do I do now? With that, how can I do things next? How can I integrate these findings from the data into my assorted business processes, or take findings from the data and use it to clean up the data and do more? And so some of what I was hearing more and more is that Tableau in some ways sort of maybe gets how they aren't this kind of engine for rendering data, but more of living within this ecosystem where there are all of these different loops and flows where we're going back upstream or out to the people who are originally creating the data in the first place, in whatever way we need to. So we saw that with pieces like the Apple Watch app, for example, that was coming out of a workflow that was being generated there, that was updating something in an upstream workflow, which was generating the data that was then being visualized in Tableau. One of the pieces for me that's kind of this open question when it comes to AI, and I want to thank Mark Bradburn for counting how many times Tableau mentioned AI in the keynote. It was 44 times. So did not have to do a drinking game for that. But that piece of, to me, when I think about applying AI within this ecosystem, the AI needs its own feedback loops. That it's one of the things that Ryan Ate, when he started out at the beginning of the talk, I was really glad to hear that they get AI is only as good as the source data. And so for us to improve the data that the AI is working with, we may want to be giving that feedback through the AI. And I wasn't hearing quite as much of that as I wanted in what Tableau is saying. But at least they're thinking more about this ecosystem with the headless BI, with the talk and the semantic layer in the fourth wave, and reusing insights and feeding things back together, if that's making sense.
Yeah, totally. Because often, always really, the Tableau is kind of a step in a workflow. And it's very rarely the case that the work that you do inside of that workflow just ends with the work in Tableau. And so what I have here is a quote that I heard. I think it was from the keynote. Tableau is the most open, flexible, and composable platform, was what I wrote down. And I'm not sure that that's the case today. In fact, I'm certain that it's not the case today, that
Yeah.
Tableau is the most open, flexible, and composable platform. But what I got from them is that this is their vision, and this is their goal, and this is the direction that they're headed in. So I heard a lot of new acronyms this week. BYOL, which means bring your own lake or bring your own data lake. BYOS, which means bring your own semantic layer, which is something that I'm sure Robert will be super thrilled to hear, because we've been skeptics of whether or not somebody will want to consume a semantic layer that's composed only inside of Tableau. And I'm hearing that they're saying, hey, you can build your semantic layer in Tableau, but also if you bring your own and you've modeled in DBT or some other location, great. BYOS, bring your own semantic. And I heard BYOLLM. In fact, I went to the session titled BYOLLM, bring your own large language model. So it's clear that they have this direction of becoming the most open, flexible, and composable platform, even if that's not what they are today.
Yep. And to that end, I do think, and this is a bit of a shift in the languaging, I think, from what I was sort of hearing maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, where I was hearing a lot more Salesforce, like Salesforce Data Cloud, Salesforce this, Salesforce that, and that it, right or wrong, there was this sort of takeaway that Tableau was trying to be this entire source of data. So everything from sort of source of truth of the data, all of your semantic layer, all of your data pipeline and orchestration, all of your visualization, all happening within the Tableau Salesforce ecosystem. And the sorted BYO pieces are one sign that Tableau's not going that route. And I don't think Tableau should, because when we think of kind of the elephant in the room is Microsoft with Power BI and Microsoft Azure and all the Azure databases. It's an entire hosting platform where you can run whatever you want on it. Tableau's never going to be able to fully compete with that. And so being in a space where there's a heterogeneous environment of multiple data sources, the assorted BYOs in there, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And in this diagram that you've got on the screen here, that's your modern enterprise information systems architecture. And then you've got
Mm-hmm.
process flows that are on top of that, that obtain data from various people inputting in various sources, and downstream subsequent processes that then go back and update the upstream
Mm-hmm.
process. So there's kind of an acknowledgement we're picking up that it's just not possible for Tableau to be everything to everybody. And so instead,
Mm-hmm.
what say we become the world's most open, flexible, and composable platform, so that those who are making use of Tableau can grab and choose which pieces they need, and then integrate them into their enterprise ecosystem in the way that fits and works for them, as opposed to trying to be everything for
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Yep. Yeah. So with that, should we talk some about the fourth wave idea?
Sure.
Yep. All right. So on those 4 points that you made of the data landscape is large and fragmented, users don't trust the data, and so on. Tableau, in their keynote, had proposed these kind of 4 layers. These are where to do that. So there was the data lakehouse, which is a new thing for Tableau, to say we're getting into that space. They kind of, or Salesforce kind of already is in a way, in terms of Salesforce Data Cloud and so on. So I see that, that the hyper technology that has underlaid Tableau for a while is what's being used in that data lakehouse. So it's some things we know there. The semantic layer piece of that is new as an idea. I have some questions about that, but we'll get to that. And then there's that agile semantics for first trusted insights piece that they're talking about as far as that semantic layer. And then there's the actionable insights where you work. So that I see is kind of where Tableau has been historically in terms of visualization, is showing those, but then also giving us things like Pulse, having those APIs and the integrations so we can tie things closer into Slack or other tools. In their demo, they went out to Workday to do something. And I find Workday really interesting because I talking with multiple people, Workday is kind of that, seems to be a bit of a tipping point with organizations in moving to cloud. That once you're willing to fully trust your HR data in the cloud,
Everything else can be in the cloud.
everything else can go. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. And so that breakdown of the
Mhm.
those 4 layers and the
Mhm.
and the fourth wave is a good segue kind of
Mhm.
into my visual synthesis of what I took from the conference.
Mhm.
So that composable word, I just heard it in lots of different places.
Mhm.
And it wasn't necessarily as though Tableau did a good job of like holistically defining what these things meant, but what
Mhm.
I got from them is obviously with the release of the federated joins of the published data source, what we have
Mhm.
now are these, or coming soon, are these composable data sources where you can compose a published data source. I can then use your published data source as a logical table in the composition of my
Mhm.
published data source.
Mhm.
Separately, I heard this concept of composable assets, which is this idea that I can make themes and skins and reusable assets, and I can package them and sell them on an internal or an external marketplace. And then
Mhm.
composable analytics, this concept of embedded analytics and the ability to, take either headless BI or the VizQL data service and pluck and pull different pieces of Tableau out of Tableau and compose them inside of web apps, meet the user in their workflow, and take the analytics piece by piece as I need them or want them out from Tableau, and embed them and use them in other downstream places and locations.
Mhm.
And so to me, kind of the big aha of the positioning that they're doing is they're saying, hey, we really want to double down on this published data source. We're saying that this published data source is this curated, groomed, uh, published, governed single location from which all of these other things can derive and concur.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can embed web components, I can embed even web authoring. Like I can put the web authoring experience with embedded analytics inside of some other web app, embedded inside of somebody else's workflow, some other place, so that if they wanted to, they could just jump into the
Mm-hmm.
Tableau web authoring environment in order to do some ad hoc analysis. So that to me is a really good
Hmm.
example of they're saying, okay, hey, let's take this published data source, which is governed and controlled by a competent author, and then piece it out. You can run your Pulse stuff on that. You can run your VizQL data service on that. You can run your headless BI stuff on that. You know who people are, and there's this broad array of user functions in order to, make use of all of these composable analytics from the published data source based on who the audience is. And then you were talking about those 4 layers. This is just a slide that I've used elsewhere in other places, and I'm repurposing it for this conversation. The traditional kind of BI landscape would have, broadly
Mm-hmm.
speaking, these kinds of layering in them. You've got your source data, and try as we may, we're always, fighting upstream in order to
Mm-hmm.
standardize those source systems, standardize those dimension, standardize that monastic data definition, and push upstream to get as much standards as possible in the source data. And then you've got some kind of data prep, data transformation layer that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got your semantic data lakehouse, your semantic layer, your data warehousing layer. And Tableau has traditionally, what you've just described, been really strongly playing in this visualization piece, this reporting and
Mm-hmm.
visualization piece. But then invariably after that visualization occur, then always there's some kind of communication that has to happen
Yeah.
above and on top of that communication, above and on top of that reporting and visualization layer.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is my synthesis of what I'm seeing, is that, always across all of these layers, we need to have a strong emphasis on design. We need to have a
Mm-hmm.
strong emphasis on cataloging and dictionarying. And what I'm seeing is that Tableau is saying, okay, we acknowledge where we've been, kind of siphoned in this
Mm-hmm.
layer. And now what we're doing is we're moving more broadly in order to get kind of vertical, or in this case, horizontal integration across the
Mm-hmm.
layers, so that if it's in your shop's best interest to use the Tableau platform to move down into the semantic layer, you can do that with us. And if it's in
Mm-hmm.
your shop's best interest to move up into that communication layer through, say, headless BI and the VizQL data service, you can do that with us. And so there's this, kind of becoming the most open, flexible, and composable platform. This is the way
Mm-hmm.
that I see them communicating that. And yet, when I look at this diagram, the thing that strikes me is that this is such a legacy way of looking at things. And to me, in today's environment with AI, it's not even necessarily the most up to date sort of framework with which to even approach a modern BI infrastructure. And so, one of the things that I'll aim to do in the future is to re-envision what this looks like now that we've got these other AI pieces in the fold.
Mm-hmm. Um, I'm I'm an AI skeptic. I I just I have to own that. And there's a piece for me with the there's the AI part for writing code, and that's very much there, I
Mhm.
think. But when we look at that diagram that you have on screen right now, okay, where is the AI that's helping people to do data cleansing and getting good data there? And I don't just mean for the those enterprise systems that are historically like the ERPs and the CRMs and such like of the world, that are these monolithic systems where AI can be applied easily, but the literally billions of CSVs and Excel files and things like that are out there. I don't see AI being applied there. Tableau Prep's doing some interesting things there along those lines, but how do we help make all of that data useful? So for me, there's a piece there with the AI chunk. And then on the other end, the creating of those feedback loops, in as much as those, like, okay, yeah, there's a few lines of code that can create a watch app and everything. Will we end up at an enterprise level with a proliferation of many, many little apps doing different things that have been enabled by AI tools for people to put them together? But how do we orchestrate and understand those?
Yeah, this is really the essence of Robert's question yesterday is the AI just doing generation, or do you see it
Mm-hmm.
being applied anywhere in terms of helping us to make that ecosystem more tidy in order
Mm-hmm.
to help make that ecosystem more coherent and uniform? And my
Mm-hmm.
answer to him was objectively no. I haven't seen a single announcement, not just from Tableau,
Mm-hmm.
but many or any other vendors that are focusing on this space. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to name the number, but I saw a statistic that cited the volume of data inside of an average organization that's estimated to be in duplicate of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just astounding. And you don't even need
Yep.
a fixed number. You can just imagine that, take a given
Mm-hmm.
enterprise, all of the data that it's working with, and boil it down, boil it down, boil it down to how much of that data and the volume of processing and munging that's
Mm-hmm.
going on is original source
Mm-hmm.
data versus how much of it is just duplicates of itself in some other bastardized form. And I couldn't agree with you more that that is ripe for opportunity to use the AI to say, crawl the box files, crawl the CSV files,
Mm-hmm.
crawl the semantic layers, and have a machine tell me how best to organize and deduplicate and normalize all of these sources. But I don't see anybody working on that yet.
Yep. Yeah, and that part of the Tableau's vision for where Tableau's going, to me, that's not part of that chunk of that. And this solving of the ingestion piece of how do we get all that data that is very small data,
Mhm. How do we get
coming
there?
from many, many sources. So that to me wasn't part of Tableau's vision. Can you pop up the slide, 2 slides back? Yeah, so a piece for me with this, and to kind of loop back to Tableau and this idea of the published data source being a central hub for things. One of the things that part of my this Tableau is a dead end tool saying for me, also comes out of the thing that gets presented to people that's easy to build in Tableau is the visualization, or relatively easy to build in the visualization. And that the thing is, a question I've had about Tableau since probably week 2 of using Tableau has been, how do I tell people how I went from my data to my visualization?
And is it reproducible?
And is it reproducible? And that place of that, so that's been an open question for me for 13 years now, since I started using Tableau. And as Tableau has layered on more and more features into that, so we had joins, we had federated joins, we can do join calculations, we can do relationships, we can do shared dimensions, we can do composable data sources coming soon, and all of that. Where is that? And that's just within the Tableau data source. And we can't describe to people what is happening within that Tableau data source in a way that really makes sense. And then we layer what we can do in a visualization. Yep. So that
Yep.
place of that is one of the things Tableau has never done well. And so it raises for me this question of, in this future of the data lake house, the semantic layer that can add even more complexity to what's going on, the composable data source, the workflows. How do we know the numbers we're getting out of Tableau are right? How do we know what the AI is telling us that's sitting on top of Tableau is accurate.
Yep. So what you're saying is that an author who connects to one of these published data sources, it's a black box for them. They don't have any ability to see the manner in which the relationships were joined, or any manner in which to see the data model that they're connecting to. And so
Mm-hmm.
as we add new complexity, moving down into the lake layer, moving up into the composable communication layer, how are we going to add that complexity with the needed transparency that has always been missing, you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because without
Yep.
that, the data sources and those layers only become useful to those who are in the know.
To those who know.
And
Yeah.
so it's moving away from the self-service analytics piece and towards the centralized BI piece that we know that centralization doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. So one of the things that I'm picking up were, Southard led with these four challenges, these four problem statements. The data is fragmented. Users don't trust the data or the insights.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think what I'm hearing you say is that you're not seeing anywhere in this a solution to the first problem statement, that the data is fragmented, and rather only a
Mm-hmm.
risk that it's plausible that we could just add more complexity with more opaqueness, making it more fragmented and less easy for those who are consuming to actually have a transparent
Mm-hmm.
visibility into how what they're looking at got to be that way.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And this is born on my own experience, helping a lot of different people in different environments working with Tableau. And it's just a truism that the source systems that we work with aren't designed to answer the whole set of business questions that are out there. So that's where we need tools like Tableau
Mhm.
to help us out, or even just being able to write SQL or pull data down into Excel so we can analyze it. That's there. That need is always there. And then there's this other need that always shows up of organizations having more data than exists in those source systems. So no matter how fast you run in updating your data lake and adding data to it, there's going to be data outside of that you want to use.
Yep. Yep. Which is where the composable and the headless stuff actually tends to help, because we
Mm-hmm.
can more deeply integrate Tableau into these Workday, Apple Watch approval process, embedded analytics, meet the user, meet the workflow, meet the holistic kind of arc of business process in its current state, as opposed to drawing it out
Mm-hmm.
into Tableau as a dead end. And yet, I guess the question you're asking is when and where and how are we going to make that whole thing transparent and visible?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. Okay, so
Yeah.
then in order to kind of wrap up, they might have left that piece out, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
big open question for you. Maybe a place where we can conclude this conversation is in terms of what they did announce. What do you see as their ability to execute?
Um, I I think it's an open question there, honestly. That like there's the Tableau's 20 years old this year.
Hmm.
So as far as starting out with a desktop app, adding server, adding mobile, adding Tableau prep, moving to cloud, everything that's happened with web editing. Um, so Tableau has definitely demonstrated an ability over the years to rebuild, re-architect,
Keep up with the
add new
times?
features. Yeah, try to keep up with the times, like redoing your whole animation rendering engine so you can support animations, for example. Uh, so there is that piece for me. The data prep piece is um,
Lackluster.
that's an open end that there's a lot of data preparation tasks that Tableau prep does not
Hmm.
um, handle right now. So the set of use cases that Tableau prep can do is focused. And if you're talking about, okay, we're going to be this enterprise data orchestration, semantic layer piece, data lake,
you have to be able to stand on top of a rock solid data preparation tool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And Tableau doesn't have that. And yes, there are tools where Tableau could say, okay, we're going to write SQL for everything, and that's doable. That satisfies a subset of the market. There's reasons why there's tools like Tableau Prep, Dataiku, Alteryx, even Apache Airflow, and so on, that are directed acyclic graph tools that have some level of a visual interface to them.
That are more robust data prep tools. Yeah. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, one of the big takeaways that I got, obviously, Microsoft and Power BI have been, stealing some of Tableau's thunder over the recent years. A lot of that is because I see it as twofold. One, pricing, right? They definitely just decided that they were going to, underprice Power BI in order to swallow up market share. But talking to Jeffrey Schaefer, he says that he's seeing that some customers are switching to Power BI, giving up and coming back. He says that he sees that this pricing model, it's obviously a bait and switch. A price can't stay falsely low forever. It's just you lower it in order to get everybody on board, and then you raise it later. And then he also observed that Microsoft's strategy to move everybody onto their Fabric architecture is going to cause some friction. So those are really three kind of different reasons why Power BI might not be all of the thunder for as long as it seems to be today. But at the same time, I do observe that Microsoft is in everything AI. They have a finger in every startup, every open AI. They've got a finger in everything AI. And I'm personally not so sure that Salesforce is going to be able to keep up with that. But my big takeaway, in order to condense this for this conversation, is that for those CIOs and chief officers who are making the decision about what do I do with my Tableau infrastructure, there's bound to be a large volume of them who don't want to change. They don't want to shift. They don't want to move away from Tableau. And so to me, a lot of this composability and this new direction of Tableau is very much aimed at making it easier for them to work with what they've got and to take what they've got and to integrate it more deeply into their environment than it was in the past, so that moving away does not become a necessity. So it could be the case that we see, Tableau kind of going one or two ways in the places where it's already installed. Either the adoption is sufficiently shallow and the lure of the dollar signs and the Microsoft and the others are strong enough to wean them away. But then for those for whom the adoption is sufficiently strong, they're going to find new ways and new opportunities in order to make the most of Tableau, in order to delve it deeper. And a lot of that just depends on expertise, which is something that we do. So there's this kind of increased demand I see in the future for those who have the skills like you and I and the other Actionauts to do this orchestration and to do this systems architecture and to do this information architecture. Because even though all of those pieces are available, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has the skill sets in order to be able to bring it all together and to orchestrate those meaningful solutions.
And I think there's another piece to what you're saying in here. For me, is about maturity levels in working with data. Like, it's one of the things I've heard about people working with Power BI. I was part of an analysis of Power BI, and one of the things I regularly heard was organizations that weren't as mature in their data use, Power BI would seem okay to them.
Yeah.
And it's the ones who wanted to do more with their data that were frustrated by Power BI.
Yep, totally. It's the ones who actually want to be very data oriented. As an example, I've been going through these mental models. And we covered discrete and continuous. And Robert pointed out, Tableau is the only visualization reporting BI tool that even has baked into it the concept of discrete and continuous. And the reason is because of Christian and Patrick and Stanford and VizQL. And the original genesis of the Tableau technology was data oriented. So a lesser mature organization might look at Power BI, might look at that price point and say, oh, it builds pie charts and bar graphs for half the price. I'll take that. But it doesn't have the depth of sophistication in terms of visual information analysis and data fidelity and adaptability that Tableau does. So as soon as you do want to go deeper into data analytics, that's when that maturity fork begins to separate.
Mm-hmm. And a way that also shows up in that Microsoft providing this kind of monolithic set of tools, data. So you want to be on Power BI, you need to be on Fabric. Fabric's going to work best if you're on a Microsoft database and so on. We have this set of AI tools that all plug into it. It's a very kind of homogeneous environment. And Tableau saying we know we're going to be in a heterogeneous environment. You're an insurance company, you've built your own LLM, you run it on your data. Like creating that flexibility, I think works. And it's also, for me, part of this maturity discussion of in a lot of cases, I think the more mature organizations are the ones that can better support the heterogeneity that actually exists in the organization.
Yep. And not everybody's going to be able or interested to go with that monolithic one shop fits all solution. And then that's when you need that adept maturity in order to be able to design, architect, and orchestrate a heterogeneous environment. So I, at least for one, am really happy to see the direction that Tableau is going with the breaking things up and the headless BI and the VisQL data server and the embedded analytics. It's allowing for us to move down into the semantic layer of Tableau if that's what we want to do. Bring our own semantic if that's what we want to do. Use the composable pieces, but all of that just requires a set of skills that is highly mature, which is what you and I do.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So if there's one takeaway for the Tableau product managers, two. First, help us to provide the transparency, right? With all of these composable pieces, help the person who's using that composable data source to see the data model that's underneath it. Help the person who's consuming the composable analytics to understand how that data got to be and what transformations it went along the way. And then focus your AI efforts on cleaning up the big hot mess that's underlying all of this stuff, which is the fragmented data. Let's sick the machines on solving that problem.
Yep. Exactly. I like that summary.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Jonathan. And thanks to all of y'all who followed along with us. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Let's make sense of this.
Let's make sense.